and welcome to Pride in London Live. This is our first chat show of 2018. Can we have a round of applause? I'm going to clap us as well. I think it's important. We've also got a wonderful panel with us here. Dr. Ranj Singh joins me, not only a doctor, but a presenter, and also, this is an amazing accolade. You have been voted hottest children's TV presenter, not once, but twice. The mums and dads love you, they dig you.
It's slim pickings.
How does it feel?
Weird.
Overwhelming?
Yeah, a bit odd, not something I'm used to, but very nice all the same.
I'm very impressed. Forget the royal wedding, because the only power couple that we would like a selfie with, of course, are you guys here, Hannah Winterbourne and Graf. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
How does it feel to be married now?
It feels a lot like being engaged.
Does it?
But no, it's really good. We're really, really happy, actually.
We're on cloud 9.
Yeah.
It's been 8 weeks and still madly in love.
So you still like each other, which is useful.
Yeah, going just about, yeah.
Just for now.
The cab ride here was a little bit hit and miss tonight, but I think we're good.
Savour it while it lasts, guys. Zoe Adjonyoh, lovely to see you.
Hello.
So you're writer, also the founder of Zoe's Ghana Kitchen.
Yes.
And the woman that is credited with bringing Ghanaian food to hipsters and the masses, apparently.
Hipsters and the masses.
And the masses, and the
I didn't
world.
realise hipsters were on the list, but yes, that's true, yeah.
Welcome.
A few various types. Thank you.
She's
very happy
picking
to
her
be
words diplomatically. Now, we'd love you to get involved as well at home. If you want to get involved, all you need to do is hashtag Pride in London Live, and also head to the Facebook page and you can comment there. We'll be reading them out in a minute. But without further ado, I think it's important we go straight in with the jugular and we ask why Pride matters. I'm going to head over to you, Dr. Ranj. Shall I just call you Dr. Ranj throughout?
Just Ranj is
Just
fine.
Ranj is fine, okay. You're like, enough of the sexy TV presenter lines and the doctors. So does Pride still matter? You know, we get people all the time, I imagine, I do anyway, saying, what's the big fuss about? You've got equality now.
I don't think I'd agree. I don't think we do have equality. We don't have equality until we have equality for everybody. That's what equality is. So when there are still hate crimes happening, when there are still transphobic headlines, when there are still people scared of holding hands on the street, we don't have equality. And until that time, and even beyond that time, we will and should have pride. I think it still matters.
And what about you guys? Because obviously, you know, there was a huge amount of hype around your wonderful wedding, but you did have some negative headlines, which you found very upsetting, understandably.
Yeah, it was difficult because the articles actually were pretty good, and it was important to us to get a really positive story out there for transgender people to show that you can be transgender and happy. But you know, there are some people who still put out some negative headlines around it and just some insensitive headlines. And so it's really important to us to highlight those and go, we need to do better as a public in terms of discussing transgender stories.
Yeah, and in case people aren't fans of The Sun, the headline said trans and wife, is that correct? After you got married?
Tran and wife.
Tran and wife.
I was trans, she was wife.
Yeah, and how did that, that must have been very upsetting to see that.
I mean, it wasn't great. Obviously, the article, I must hasten to add, was really, really positive. And I think, you know, that obviously it was a slow news day. We ended up on the front page, which was a surprise to everyone. And I guess they've got to sell their papers, and unfortunately it was misjudged, let's put it that way, ill-advised. But obviously to get our story out there to a broader audience, which is what we really wanted, to show that trans people can be happy. And obviously, you know, we have been put in a position where we're very lucky that trans kids are given hope, and parents of trans children are given hope that their children will do well and be successful and fall in love. And when you think that, you know, 45% of trans children at the moment are attempting suicide, I think, you know, to get that story out there, regardless of the headline, was our goal, and that's what we did, so it was great.
And when you see headlines like that, does it make you think Pride matters more than ever then?
I think, you know, last year we were actually very, very lucky to be on a bus with lots of mermaids children from the Mermaids charity, and these kids who'd never seen a Pride before, they were ranging in age from about 6 till about 15, and you could see that they had never felt the love and support, and they were, you know, drag queens coming and sprinkling glitter on them and wrapping bows around their necks, and one guy, you know, came and put a kid on his shoulders and danced around with him, and these kids had never had that, never just felt safe and accepted in a sea of rainbow and pink and blue, and it was absolutely beautiful, and for that alone I think Pride matters.
Yeah, I mean, if you take the context of some of these kids are walking through school, walking through the streets, walking through the playgrounds and getting hate and bullied on a daily basis, the contrast of going somewhere where you just feel accepted and safe, you know, through a big city like, you know, London or any big, you know, Pride event, you know, it's so important, so important.
Life-saving, honestly. Just that one day can carry a kid through, or can carry an adult through, and carry an old person through for the rest of the year, because they know that on that one day they're going to be surrounded by people who love them, and they can hold their lover's hand and kiss their lover, and it just doesn't matter.
Well, I'm going to bring you in. So, does Pride still matter then? Did you kind of, when you were younger, did you sort of watch Pride and think, or go to Pride and feel like this is an amazing thing?
I mean, yes, is the short answer. I mean, you know, look, of course Pride matters, and it's not as much... The other thing to remember is Pride is a celebration as well. It's like we all need to remember that the community needs to celebrate ourselves and each other as much as it is about highlighting all of the issues and inequality that still exists in the world. It is still a place where we can celebrate who we are and be open and magical and amazing and embrace each other. But yeah, you know, as soon as I could, I got my Snoop Doggy Dogg looking self to the nearest Pride I could find. And I very quickly moved to Brighton, which was, we were just talking, it was a mecca, you know, for a young gay person of a certain age at that time. And, you know, a lot has changed in the last 20 years. And, you know, there's a lot more conversation and diversity and acceptance for sure, but there are still huge problems. And as long as, you know, as Dr. Suave was saying, as long as there are still issues to be discussed around this and equality isn't there yet, then of course Pride matters, but it also matters just to remember that it's an occasion for us to celebrate who we are and what we are. And,
things have, I mean, Zoe and I hadn't seen each other in about 15 years before she walked in here about 5 minutes ago.
Which is odd because I'm only 25.
Yes, that is correct. But you know, we used to hang around in Brighton and do the prides and do the club nights, and in a day when the landscape looked very, very different.
Bleak.
Yeah, really bleak. And I think, you know, the way things have leapt on in 15 years, and obviously it is slow progress, and there weren't trans people around back then, were there? Or you didn't kind of see them.
Yeah.
So things are moving on, and I think, you know, it's Pride that kind of really helps to move that on and gets the conversation going. And Pride Month, obviously in June, is really important to a lot of people.
I wish I was in Brighton with these two. It sounds really fun. The golden years. I want to hear the stories. Sounds a bit seedy, but it sounds fun. Now, Ranj, I was going to ask you, do you think we take Pride for granted? You know, we're talking a lot about celebration, but obviously in many countries it's illegal to celebrate Pride. Do you think we kind of ever take it for granted?
I think we're very lucky to have it. We are very lucky to be able to go somewhere and celebrate ourselves, and I totally agree with you. Pride is, first and foremost, to me, a celebration. It's a celebration of diversity and love and everything that's great about the world. But we mustn't forget where Pride came from. Pride came from people's struggle. Pride came from a political place. Pride came from a place where people just wanted to be able to live and be who they were and had to fight. It was a fight at one point. And what I don't want, I love going to Pride and I see lots of people having fun and having a laugh, but what I don't want to do is see people or hope that people that are younger will forget where Pride came from. And Pride will almost, and that's when I think, I do hear people say, I think Pride has lost its meaning. I was like, what do you mean it's lost its meaning? It's amazing. And by that they mean some people don't remember where its origins were and why it started, and the fact that it's still illegal in some countries. I mean, it's illegal to be LGBTQ plus in 70 odd countries around the world. They're not going to have prides, are they? Prides are getting shut down in other places. We need to recognise that it's a special thing and actually keep that going and never forget where it came from.
Yeah, do you think there's a danger as Pride becomes more commercial that it loses its political edge? You know, it's brilliant that there are lots of big organisations promoting Pride, because as we know, many people aren't out at work, so that's important. But does it lose its political edge when it becomes a bit more fluffy, shall we say?
I mean, I think it can be both things. I don't think you have to have a Pride that's entirely political. I don't think you have to have a Pride that's entirely party. You know, you have a big long parade which has sections of people to do different things. So you can have people who can march for a political stand, and you have people that march just for openness and to celebrate and to show the world that we're happy, loving people. I just don't think that we have to consider it as a mutually exclusive, and I hate seeing people drag down other people who are enjoying Pride in their individual ways. You know, it should be a day to support each other in whatever we're doing.
And the British Army has a big presence at Pride. Do you think that that's been helpful for people coming out? Have you heard from officers who have said, you know, it's been really useful? Because the presence is very clear to see from the British Army. Yeah,
I mean, it's great. I mean, and you've got to think back that, you know, only 18 years ago, it was you weren't allowed to be gay in the army. And that's how far that we've come in a really short period of time. And last year we had Commander Field Army, who's a senior officer, march with us as a straight ally. And that's, you know, to me, that's incredible. So to every person in the army who was worried about coming out, to see some of your senior leadership march in uniform with pride You know, it's incredible. It's so important, and I think a lot of people look to institutions like the military for inspiration, and I think people look at an institution like the army and think of where that's come from and how quickly it's done it. Maybe we can do that too, and I think that's really important. That's why it's a great thing that the military have a big marching presence on Pride.
Yeah, I'm going to bring your other half in now. Obviously, you come from the sort of arts background, very different to the military. Has Pride been useful in your own journey? I hate the X Factor word journey, but has it been useful?
I mean, Pride for me, you know, I came out as a lesbian when I was 17 years old, and lived very much as part of that community. And I was going to Pride from sort of 16, 17 years old. And so I've seen a lot of the community. I've obviously lived as a trans man and a lesbian, and seen, obviously, there's a lot more of a gay scene than there ever was. There's a lot more lesbian visibility than there ever was. But, you know, being there every year, and I've been to Manchester Pride, and I've been to Birmingham Pride, and Bristol Pride, and I think Liverpool Pride. I think one of the really important things about London Pride is obviously it's managed to stay free of charge. So obviously people can go and be a part of that without, and I think that's obviously due to sponsorship from the corporates. And I don't think that without that sponsorship from the corporates, that would manage to happen. So I think that's quite important. But I mean, Pride is something that I look forward to every year. And last year and the year before, in fact, Hannah and I were blessed to be able to present the main stage for a couple of hours. And when you look out at that sea of happy faces, even when it's chucking it down with rain, and they're all smiling, and you just think, this is just, I mean, it's phenomenal. For me, as I say, it's the kind of thing that gives you goosebumps when you look back. So it's very important to us. And I have to say that watching Hannah march a couple of years back in uniform with all her generals and so on and so forth was a really moving moment, and I felt incredibly proud of her.
Oh, you're amazing on stage. I saw you on stage and it was incredibly euphoric last year. Right, I could sit and talk about this all day, but we are going to now throw to a VT. We've been talking all morning, so it's because you're here this morning. I feel like I'm on a morning show.
It feels like it.
It does look like it. It does look like it. We've been talking about why Pride matters, but now let's hear from Alison Camps, our co-chair, about what the Pride team have been up to.
The very first Pride in London happened in 1972, and since then we've come a long way, both as a movement and a community. Although the landscape has totally changed since that time, our job isn't yet done. In 2012, London was given the honour of hosting World Pride, but sadly the group organising Pride at that time got into financial difficulties and the event almost collapsed. In response, a team of community-based activists came together and in 2013 won the competitive tender process that Boris Johnson, who was then Mayor of London, had launched to find a new organiser. And over the past 5 years, Pride in London, which is a not-for-profit, volunteer-led community interest company, has worked closely with London's LGBT+ community, the Mayor's team, the emergency services and Westminster City Council to build an event which is worthy of our capital city, free and safe to attend, blending celebration of the freedoms we have won with protest against discrimination, injustice, homophobia, biphobia and transphobia wherever they exist. This year, in 2018, we were asked by the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, to carry on our work for another 5 years, and we were honoured to accept. We have learned so much since 2013, but that doesn't mean that there isn't still room for improvement or that we think we are the finished article. Every year we ask people for feedback on how we did. Last year, we received criticism about the degree to which Pride in London is sufficiently diverse and inclusive. We have listened to that criticism and we've taken action to make sure we do better in future.
And welcome back to Pride in London Live. We are discussing whether Pride matters, and I have this wonderful panel with me here. You too at home can get involved. All you need to do is go on Facebook, type in your comments, or you can tweet us, and the hashtag is Pride in London Live. So now we're going to be talking about your first ever Pride. Take yourself back, Ranj.
So,
was it a good outfit?
Always.
Of course.
So I have to confess, I'm a bit of a gayling.
Gayling?
So I haven't been out for very long. I came out relatively later in life, and I've only ever been to, a handful of Prides actually. Yeah. And my very first Pride was only a few years ago, and I remember Pride is the reason I am who I am, because although before that I'd come out and my LGBT family had really helped me rebuild a life because things fell apart prior to that. I never really accepted who I was until I saw other people do it. And I remember being on the top of, I was really lucky, I got to be on a float, standing there looking out on this sea of people who were all smiling and cheering and supporting us. And I'd never experienced that as a gay person, ever. I'd never thought I would feel that. I remember at one point just stopping and having, like, welling up and thinking, wow, this has finally given me permission and allowed me to be me. And that's why I will never forget my first Pride, ever.
You kind of also realise how important it is when you're on stage at Pride, like you guys, or when you go to your first Pride. I think I had a really similar feeling to you. I kind of thought it was important because everybody else told me it was important. So I was like, yeah, the party line is that Pride is a really big deal. But actually I didn't really believe it until I'd been in the middle of it.
I was terrified of going before I went, because I just thought it was a big, massive hedonistic party. I just thought,
What's
people
wrong with
just,
that?
I mean,
That's dreadful. Zoe, I want to bring you in because we need to hear about, did you go to Brighton Pride first?
No, my first Pride was, I came out relatively late. I guess I was about 18, 19.
Oh, I was much later than that.
But I mean, yeah, interestingly, so I've been living this tomboy lifestyle for all my life. And then suddenly for this Pride, I thought I'm going to go in like a white suit. And I had like white trousers and a white jacket. And I looked ridiculous. But I just remembered like I just remember like similarly like just being swept over by how many gay people there were in one place, and realizing, oh yeah, like this is a thing, like this is okay, like apparently everybody's gay and that's okay, But the highlight, if I have to say for me, was going to Freedom Bar. 2 highlights, one is good, one is bad. Went to Freedom Bar in this ridiculous outfit, feeling like I was like John Travolta smashing it. And there was an actress there, I don't know if she's still acting now, but I think her name's Femi or Kemi, and she used to be in Hollyoaks or something, and she came grinding up to me on the dance floor, and I was like, this is it, I'm gay, I'm gay. And it was like the most magical moment. And then the bad part of it was, we went to Heaven, I think, afterwards, and in the queue we got asked, we got made to I had to kiss my girlfriend to prove I was gay. So that was like the weird other side of it, that 25 years ago. But I mean, overall the experience was like just amazing. It
sounds like a fantasy land. It sounds incredible. What about for you guys? Did you, was your first Pride, when was that, and how did you remember it?
So my first Pride was fairly recent because I only came out about 4 or 5 years ago, and I was in the army, I lived abroad, and so I was very much, didn't interact with the LGBT scene at all. And then all of a sudden, not only did I come out, but my transition was splashed across the newspapers, and so all of a sudden I was like everywhere as well as being out. And so I kind of had to manage that, and I went along to Pride, and I was part of the Army's marching contingent. And it was overwhelming. So we had this kind of get together first, to sort of polite drinks and all that stuff before you go out onto the march. And I was meeting all these senior generals and the Minister for Armed Forces, and it was just it was really such contrast to the big celebrations outside. So you're going from these really kind of polite conversations with senior officers who are very supportive and very lovely, and then all of a sudden you're bang on parade, and it is so loud because we're marching with a band. And you can barely hear the band to keep in step because everyone's screaming so loudly. And we always get such a great reception because we're in uniform, and it's kind of a bit different for the rest of the parade. But it was really just amazing. I remember just having such an adrenaline buzz at the end of it, and it was just overwhelming.
Did you feel like your story, because your story was in the newspapers, that you were kind of catapulted to this icon person quite quickly? I know it's difficult being an icon, but was that quite difficult? Because it puts a lot of pressure on you. You've got journalists and people asking you questions, and you become a mouthpiece for sort of LGBT overnight in some ways. And was there a lot of pressure? Did you find?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't use the word icon. I think that's going too far.
I would definitely.
Me too.
But I was quite glad to do it, really, because I kind of put my story out there because basically my story was going out there whether I liked it or not, and so I was given the option either let it happen or control it. And so I gave my story to make sure it was my story that was being told, not some facsimile of my story. And it just got a really good response, and I had responses from people in the military, veterans, young kids, their families, and they all said this is so wonderful to see a trans woman in not a stereotypically feminine role, just being themselves, being open and being honest, and being happy. And I realised that how important it was, and I knew how important it was because that's what I needed when I was growing up, but it wasn't there for me. So I just took this real privilege that I had and continued telling my story, and I never did it for any other reason than, as long as those messages were still coming in, I was still going to tell my story. And and that's it. And it's not hard because I'm not doing anything but being honest about myself. I'm just saying the truth, which is I'm a trans woman, I've got a productive life, I'm now married, and I have a happy life. And that's the story.
Very iconic, I think. Just to bring you in then, do you remember your first Pride?
I do. I mean, my first Pride was, I was about 16, 17, and I didn't have any gay friends, and I'd sort of just come out, and a friend had introduced me to his much older ex-nanny, this guy who was about 50 odd, and Martin, who was one of the head honchos at Pride, had taken me to, I think it was Victoria Park at the time, and I was backstage because obviously, you know, he was the head honcho, but he sort of threw me in, and obviously, you know, I was Right Said Fred were walking by, and Femme to Femme, this lesbian band, I was like, this is just amazing. But I was so tired. I was a little baby dyke, and I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I was just like, wow, where have I landed? And you know, I'd look out of the tent, and there would be thousands of gay people, and I thought, my God, everyone's gay. This is just amazing. And after that, like you, I ended up in Freedom Bar, which was great. Then went on to Heaven, and they did the sort of, you know, can I check your fingernails to see if you look lesbian enough? And then I ended up in Trade, and I was so horrified that I think that put me off for a good couple of months of venturing outside my house. Trade at 3 a.m. on Pride night is a scary place for a 16-year-old. Don't do it.
This corner have the best stories, don't they? They're really good.
I'm catching up.
I feel like off air we get to hear what has really gone down in that corner. But has it changed for you, Zoe, over the years? Because we've kind of watched it change. How much has it changed from your early Prides to the Prides you see now? And do you like it?
Do you know what? I'm going to be very honest if I can.
Please do.
Because that's why I'm here, isn't it, to be honest? I mean, somebody spoke earlier about like the corporate side of Pride, and I think that when I moved to Brighton, and when Brighton Pride was in its heyday, let's say, that was an amazing Pride, wasn't it? It was just like so inclusive, so much fun, and all that. And so for a long time, I didn't, you know, I might have popped back to London to go to Pride every now and then, but I at the same time was witnessing London Pride. I felt becoming a lot more corporate, and I feel like I identified less with that. It had less pull to me, do you know what I mean? But anyway, Brighton Pride, happy times, until they started charging, and then until
then it went rapidly
suddenly
downhill.
This homophobic element came out in Brighton, and I'm still unclear as to why that, what the disconnect was that happened in Brighton there. But then I moved back to London about 10 years ago, and the last couple of times I've been to to London Pride, I had that, I think for a minute what happened for me was, I was like, oh, these new gays don't know they're born. You know, like, do you know what I mean? They don't know what it was like in my day, they take it for granted. And you know, you make a good point. It's like, because there is so much sexual freedom, I'm not saying that it's everywhere, but because it is a different time now for kids growing up, and there is a lot more openness and freedom in your sexuality for a lot of youngsters. And I had this thing of, they don't know the struggle. And I felt like maybe Pride had disconnected from telling that story or being meaningful in that way. But you're right. So a couple of years ago, I went back to London Pride, and I was like, and at first I was like, oh, no, I don't like it. Barclays are everywhere. And then I just, you know, you realise how many people come from not just all over the country, but from across Europe. And you realise the celebratory element, and you realise how many people are there who are coming from places across even the UK, even in London, like quite locally, who don't have a, you know, who aren't able to be open and free in the space where they come from. And for that day, for that weekend, or for the period of Pride, they have this, you know, revelatory moment, and it takes you back to that time, and you're like, oh yeah, it is important actually, and it's a big deal, and yeah, we should be getting behind it, and we should all come from everywhere, like no matter what your journey has been over the last 20, 30 years or 5 years, don't forget that was really important to you, like when you were coming out and having that other group of people around you who supported you and loved you and felt similar. So yeah.
I think you make a good point. Actually, do you think we can sometimes be a bit hostile within our own community? Sometimes we can
absolutely.
No,
gays on gay. You know, we hate on each other a little bit. You kind of, you know, you see new people coming through, and maybe we're not as welcoming. I've definitely been in gay bars or situations where I don't feel as welcomed by clusters of lesbians as I would perhaps want to be.
I mean, and perhaps this is a different subject for another day. But what I worry about is the LGBTQ and the rest of the letters that I can't remember because we are so many now. But I worry about the fracturing of that community and the infighting that happens between the different groups that I feel is unnecessary. Like, you know, pride and, you know, pride should just represent everybody who feels queer, right? But I think there's a certain politics, and as I say, I'm not sure it's the right platform for this conversation, but I think there is a certain other politics and agenda behind what queer is and queer theory and all of the different versions of that. And I do feel sometimes like it splinters people out more than unnecessarily. And I do feel like being a lesbian is like being, for example...
We've got it started now.
For example, I remember I came out of a long-term relationship a while back, and I went on various dating platforms for lesbians, and nobody was calling themselves a lesbian anymore. And I was like, what has happened to lesbians? You know, there was this...
A lot of pansexuals.
Oh my God.
Yeah. You should know it as a chef. It sounds like a dish. I feel like it sounds like some
there were
sort of
so many
culinary thing.
names for being like a person attracted to another person of the same sex without wanting to call themselves a lesbian. I was like, this is kind of ridiculous. Like, what's wrong with being a lesbian?
So you felt like there might be some shame actually within all of that.
Yeah, and you know, even just talking to like, you know, a new generation of young gay people, there is like this kind of like lesbian's a dirty word, and I don't know why anymore.
We need another debate on this. This is very interesting.
We did. As I say, it's a probably
Queer is
conversation.
cool. Queer is cool.
Well, queer is cool,
Go
but
with queer.
you know, what is queer these days? That's the other thing.
Guys, we're generating so many headlines here. We're going to come back to it in a minute, but let's find out what's going on in the Prideosphere and see the headlines in the LGBT world.
The Prime Minister has announced that this summer will see the rollout of a nationwide LGBT action plan. Writing for Gay Times, Theresa May said the government would put forward steps to help make us a country where no one feels the need to hide who they are or who they love. Details are yet to be announced, but they are expected to include improvements within healthcare, education and personal safety. The UK Pride Organisers Network has branded a special clothing deal between Primark and Stonewall an insult. Speaking to Pink News, the group said the leading LGBT+ charity had been critical to Pride movements in the past, but was now taking away vital funds from struggling local Pride organisations. Many on social media also raised concerns over the fact that the items would be produced in countries where identifying as LGBT+ is still illegal. Primark said they hope to support the community globally. Sir Ian McKellen spoke to Time Out this week ahead of a release of a film on his life. He spoke of the struggles of being an actor and out as gay. When asked why he thought there were so few gay characters in major blockbusters, he said, "Nobody looks to Hollywood for social commentary, do they? Gay men don't exist." And finally, the BBC remembered this iconic moment 30 years on. Two activists stormed the BBC News studios ahead of Section 28 coming into force. The law banned the promotion of homosexuality and stopped teachers encouraging the acceptability of same-sex relationships. The BBC did not press any charges and both activists were released. Section 28 was repealed in 2000 in Scotland and in 2003 in the rest of the UK.
Hello and welcome back to Pride in London Live. We are talking about whether Pride matters. And we've had some very animated chats already with the wonderful panel. Now guys, we've got some comments coming in from the outside world. So I know it's very frightening, but let's talk about it. So Will asks, as the UK looks to be more global about LGBT equality and human rights, how can Pride in London, in such a multicultural city, help make a statement? So the bar is now very high. How can we still make a statement? You know, how can we still shock in some ways?
I don't think we need to shock necessarily. I think as long as we're vocal and we're present and we're upstanding and we stand up for what we believe in, I think that's got to be the core of it. But actually what we now need to be thinking about is how do we disseminate this to other parts of the world where people don't have pride? How do we get it to that kid that's in a remote part or rural part of the world where being gay is illegal, who really just wants to belong? We need to now reach those guys and we need to get it out to them. And actually the digital world and the internet is going to play a part in that. And maybe that's where we need to be going as well. You know, Pride needs to not just be a physical event. Perhaps it needs to be more of a digital event as well.
Yeah, do you think we kind of get caught in our sort of London bubble or our UK bubble and we sort of think the fight's over in many ways? And actually you make a good point. Is the statement a global statement actually to send out, you know, in Ghana, for example, it's still illegal to be gay.
It is. I mean, even my family, if I'm honest, even my family in Ghana don't know that I haven't officially come out. I mean, they look at me.
You have now.
Hi, Grandma.
Hello.
I'm so gay. I married a woman.
It's pretty gay.
But no, it has never been a conversation that I could have like blah, blah, blah. but I mean, I guess they all know because I'm pretty blasé about it. But anyway, sorry, fam. But yes, it is an important responsibility actually, because the more that we gain our rights and freedoms, the more responsibility we have to try and disseminate that, right? I guess so, because I guess it has to come from policy making. It has to come from political voices. You know, Sadiq Khan, it's all very nice rocking up to Pride and holding hands with us on the parade, but what are you doing about like policy setting and agenda making? And you know, UK foreign aid, is that just about X, or is it also about Y and Z and the other X chromosome? You know, there's a bigger thing, responsibility, I guess.
Jake, what about you? Do you think we need to make statements at Pride? Do you think it's important?
I mean, I think it's obviously very important that we're as inclusive as possible, that we make minority and marginalised groups feel as welcome as possible, that we go out of our way to make those groups feel included. And I think, because obviously for a lot of people it's very hard for them to be there because of cultural reasons or backgrounds, and I think they really need to be encouraged and shown that it's a safe and welcoming and warm space, which by and large I think Pride in London is. But I think, globally as well, obviously there are countries all across the world, but even in somewhere like the US, obviously now being LGBT in the US is a really, really scary state of affairs. And when I was coming out as trans, I found my community online, and I think a lot of people look to online now to find their communities and are obviously able to find their kind of global network and their global community, and that becomes life-saving, that becomes an invaluable resource. And I think, just being able to sit here today and do things like this with faces that possibly people can relate to and think, well, that's me, or that's me. And I think all of these little things are, obviously we do this already, but I think there really needs to be more of a push to make it easier and to make it more inclusive for those across the world that just don't have that ability and that voice to be heard.
Yeah, Hannah, Jake makes a good point. It's kind of, well, for me, I speak personally, but it's about identification, isn't it? Not all gay people or LGBT people look the same, clearly. So, sometimes it takes a while to come out because you think, well, I'm not butch, so that's not me, so I can't be gay. Do you think it's about identification? Do you think it's about... I think
it's definitely about role models, visible role models in all walks of life. And so you can't just have one role model, you can't put out, say Tom Daley, he's the gay role model, because there's lots of gay men who don't look or relate to him or what he does. So, you need doctors, you need filmmakers, you need chefs, you need army people, and a spread of ethnicities, a spread of, sexualities, identification, the whole lot, it needs to be out there so that when you're that kid or that person who feels isolated, and they turn on the TV or the radio or click online, they can find someone and go, that's like me. And they can look at them and go, they're happy, they've got a productive life, I can have that too. And that seedling of hope can then grow into something really, really special. So it's about making sure that lots of different varieties of people are represented in many different ways. And if we get that, then we'll have the best chance of reaching those vulnerable people.
Hannah for Prime Minister, what do you think?
Oh my God,
absolutely. Somebody, please. Matt's got a good question here. He asks, what does the panel think Pride is for? Is it just LGBT people, or has it been hijacked by straight people as an excuse for a party?
Yes.
I've heard that. I've heard that said a lot about Brighton Pride actually now.
It's just being infiltrated by straight people. And is there anything wrong with that?
Yes.
Well,
in a lot of ways. I mean, we remember when we used to hang about in Brighton together, it started off and it was a really small, it had a community feel to it. And over the course of my being there, and I was in Brighton for about 2 or 3 years, it became that a lot of other people would come in, and they'd come for the acts, or they'd come for the party, or they'd come to get drunk, and obviously it becomes less of a safe space. And I'm not saying this is specifically Brighton, because I don't want to cast any aspersions on Brighton, but I think when you have that mix of alcohol and possibly people who aren't within the community, and everyone's sort of thrown in together, then things happen.
I think it's balance, isn't it? I mean, I've always been like a believer in, I never understood the division between a gay male space and the lesbian space that used to be in the 80s and so on. And likewise, we have more spaces that you don't need so many gay spaces, because we just all are everywhere, more comfortably than we used to be, And I think that, straight people who are allies are more than welcome. Obviously, I think the Brighton situation is specific to that. It's a locality thing. I don't know, but they have. Again, I had left Brighton 10 years ago, but I've heard lots of stories of it being kind of overpowered by a community that it wasn't meant for. And I think you have to just be careful about how you let others in, and
because you don't want to seem hostile either, do you?
No,
I'm going to bring Hannah in here because I feel like you're actually
Yeah,
to say something.
because I think we need to remember that the LGBT community is wider than just people who are LGBT. So you could be the mother or the father of an LGBT person. You could be the brother, the sister, the cousin. These are all people who maybe are supporting their LGBT brethren, or maybe it's a colleague or whatever. And like I say, I've been to Pride with some high-profile military officers who are as allies. And that is signalling something really strong to other people there. So I agree, sometimes people take it for granted and they just come along because it's a party. But I think we've got to be very careful of not lumping all non-LGBT people into the same bucket.
No.
And remember that, and more than anything, what we're saying is we want equality and inclusivity. And that means for everyone.
And also celebration though as well. So if everybody wants to be there to celebrate the fact that we are all looking for the same things in terms of diversity and equality, then great. I think that's the key, really. It's always
also
about balance.
Sorry to interrupt, but some people are questioning as well. So, when you first go to gay bars, you don't necessarily have a distinct identity. And I think when you're first coming out, it can be quite a hostile environment in some ways. If people don't welcome you in, if you perhaps don't look very gay. So, so you have to be careful about that, don't you? You have to be careful about kind of what you're going to do, audition and get people's paperwork from them at the door and check they're properly gay.
I think it is really important. And we talk about allies and we talk about inclusion and everything, but it is seriously important. I have lived most of my life so far as a straight man, and if I didn't feel that welcoming feeling from the community, I don't know where I would be. So actually I think it is important. But you're right, it's very much about why you're there. Are you there because you want to have a laugh and you just want to see your favourite pop act and you want to get drunk with your mates, or are you there because actually you feel something for the community, you feel an alliance, you feel a kinship, or you feel passionately about something? Yeah, we have to be really careful. I don't want to put ideas in people's heads and say, you're not here for a good enough reason, so you're not allowed
but
in.
Even those people who come for a party,
Yes.
if they come for a party and they arrive at Pride and they have their eyes opened into what it means to be LGBT and the wonderful people that we are in our breadth of diversity, then that's a really positive thing. We can change someone's minds there. So even that, I think we have to be careful. As soon as it oversteps into you're ruining Pride for someone who's LGBT and should be in a safe space, then I think there's an issue. But until then,
I've got to say, when I was first coming out, sort of 16, 17, and I didn't know anyone else gay, I would go to the candy bar with a gaggle of sort of all my best friends from school who are all boys, straight guys. And the lesbians would hate it. But after a while, they'd get to know them, and it'd be like a little gang that we'd kind of arrive together, and they'd all be quite nice to me. And then eventually they sort of grew to love the boys. But I think, obviously it is all about allies, and there will be people that look for trouble, be it walking home through Soho on a Friday night. They're going to be looking for trouble, as they would coming to Pride to look for trouble. But I think by and large, of course, as a community, as a global community, and I don't just mean LGBT people should all be working towards eventually having a Pride where we can all be together, and it's not an LGBT Pride, it's just people together in a park or in a street having fun, and those labels cease to exist. I think that's what we're really working towards, essentially.
Jake, for Deputy Prime Minister, what do you think?
Got my flag.
Right, I could listen to your day, but we are going to have to wrap up soon. One final thought from the panel. If you were going to Pride for the first time, Dr. Sexy Ranj, what would your advice be? Sorry to objectify you on this special day. It's really not. It's not really the right tone, is it? What would your advice be to somebody who's never been to Pride before and might be a bit nervous about it?
Don't be afraid to be you. You're going to be surrounded by so much love and so much acceptance. Just take it in for that one day, for that few hours that you're going to be there. Just take it in, and you belong. And if you've never felt like you've never belonged before, and this is the first time you're going, you are in for an effing treat.
Dr. Ranj, for Home Secretary, I think. Hannah, going over to you now. What would your advice be to somebody who's never been to Pride?
I mean, my joke answer would be get the last train home. Make the most of it. I agree with everything that you said, which is that just be yourself. That's the point of Pride. And maybe you've got someone to go with, and if you haven't, then just be open, and you'll be surprised what friends you can make. But just enjoy it in any way that you want to enjoy it. If you want to go out drinking and that's the only thing you do, then do that. If you just want to sit back and observe, then do that. Make it your Pride.
Jake, your top tip?
I would say, again, just be aware, be sort of open to everything, but just know that there are a lot of people out there that will see you across the crowd and will try and make you feel comfortable, that will try and make you their friend, that will try and put in it, you know, I think there are a lot of people out there that just see themselves, and I've looked across the room and thought, oh, you know, that kid, that young trans guy looks a bit lonely, let's go over and sort of bring him in. And, you know, you can really make the difference and really make someone's day, but just know that essentially people are there just to have one hell of a effing great day. And also I would say take loo roll.
Top tip. Zoe, now you've come out to your entire family across the globe, live. What would your advice be?
I mean, obviously, I agree with you're a great erudite speaker.
Great, isn't he?
I very much agree with you and everything you all said. I think if you can relax on that, if there's one day of the year where you can relax and be yourself, when you leave the house, look at yourself in the mirror and be like, yeah, it's my day. Just like relax into it and, you know, let your hair down and be yourself and enjoy it.
And wear a white suit.
And dress as John Travolta.
Don't wear a white suit.
Always dress as John.
And be safe.
And be safe, absolutely.
Always be safe.
Doctors in the house.
Absolutely.
Thank you to our wonderful panel. Can we have a round of applause for the panel? And thank you for all your wonderful comments at home and for taking part. We will be here next week, same time, same place. Hope you can join us. Have a wonderful week.